Welcome to Backstage Pass with me, Carlos Miguel Prieto, with insights on this week's program with your North Carolina Symphony. Hi, I'm Carlos Miguel Prieto, Music Director of the North Carolina Symphony, and I'm so happy to be reaching out to you in this inaugural week of the season and in this new adventure where I hope that I can share with you some of the ideas that always come up to my mind. And the idea of this program is how can I share with people the reason why a certain program may be very special to me or exciting. And I think this opening program is a perfect example of the many, many great things that happened in this country in the last century, especially towards the end of the 19th century, bridging into the first half of the 20th century. As you know, in this season, we are celebrating America 250, and there's many, many ways of doing this. And one way, which I think is very beautiful, is to honor a figure like that of Dvorak. Dvorak was a Czech composer, a composer very much rooted in the traditional music of his country. But Dvorak had a life which composers rarely had before. You know, today people travel around the world or around different places much more than they used to even just a century ago. And Dvorak is one of the first examples of a composer who emigrated or who came from his country to the US. He was invited to come to New York City, to come teach in New York City. And as soon as he made it there, he discovered a world much beyond his wildest dreams, a world of opportunity, but also a world of musical traditions and richness that he did not know about. He was especially astounded by the tradition of gospel music, by the traditions in Native American tunes, and just by so many things that he thought were unique about this country. And he produced a handful of works that are today staples of the repertoire that are homage to this new world. It's his Ninth Symphony, and we know it as either of or from the New World, or just simply New World Symphony. This program, the first half, starts with an overture by Samuel Barber. I have always considered Samuel Barber one of the masterful American composers and one of the most unique cases of someone finding at a very early age his talent. So Barber, Samuel Barber, came from a well-to-do family and soon told his parents that he wanted to be a composer. And they were enlightened enough that they actually supported this idea, and Barber went to study at Curtis in Philadelphia, where he not only worked on his instrument, which was piano, but also on his love, which was composition. And the overture that we start the season with, the overture to the play The School for Scandal, was his thesis, his senior year thesis. And I think you will agree with me that it is an incredible work for anyone, but it is even more incredible when you are talking about someone who is 20, 21 years old. The Schools for Scandal overture is full of the humor that characterizes the play, but it's also a overture that follows the symphonic form of the old-time overtures, but already with his own incredible colors, his lyricism, and also his Americanness. I've always thought that Barber is of course an American composer and a perfect example of what one can call the American school, but he is a very unique voice. He is his own voice. This combination of scholarity, his use of things like fugue, his masterful use of orchestration, as well as his ability with tunes. He was a great lyricist, and you only have to listen to three moments for this to sink in. One is the beautiful oboe solo from Barber's First Symphony, the beautiful oboe solo from his violin concerto, and the beautiful oboe solo in the slow part of this overture. So he had kind of a love affair with oboists, and he gave oboists some of the best tunes that any American composer has given them, and this overture is an example. Immediately after that, we're going to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto Number 4. Now, I'm reading your mind, and I'm imagining people are thinking, what does Rachmaninoff fit into an American program? Why a Rachmaninoff, which is probably the epitome of the Russian pianist and the Russian composer, have to do with a program that includes Barber and that includes the New World Symphony? Well, very much because Rachmaninoff had already established himself as an important performer in the US and had established his own relationship with this country, enough for him to learn and admire the idiom of jazz. Many people, and this is the score to Rachmaninoff's Fourth Symphony, and I'm not going to open it or tell you anything technical about the score, but there are sections in this piece that will remind you of Gershwin. And of course, Gershwin was a sensation when Rachmaninoff was around, and it is absolutely impossible for Rachmaninoff not to have known a piece like the Rhapsody in Blue. So this concerto, while being very Russian, it is composed, it is dedicated to a Russian composer, Nikolai Medtner, is also imbued with the language and the style of the new American music, which Rachmaninoff had already tasted in this country. So that this piece kind of inaugurates a piece, an aspect of Rachmaninoff which I consider fascinating, which is the American aspect. And there are other works that I would cite, the Paganini Rhapsody, the Symphonic Dances, Opus 45, a very contemporary work of this, and also his Symphony Number 3. Along with this Fourth Piano Concerto, I would call them Rachmaninoff's American works, where the idiom of American music is already very clearly in his language. About Dvorak's New World Symphony, there's very little that I can add to what's already common knowledge and what you can find anywhere you look. But I can add something from my own way of thinking, which is that I find fascinating and actually very, very beautiful the fact that a composer considered one of the great composers of his time already, and who is invited to the U.S. As because of his stature in Europe, is able to embrace a new culture and a new world enough to be humble enough to learn melodies and learn ideas almost from scratch. He actually would insert himself in some communities and listen to people singing in church or in community events just to experience this world. And he has incredible letters expressing the admiration for this music and the richness of this tradition. And in the symphony, in a way, for me, this is called From the New World, but it just could be called the meeting of two worlds or something like that, because the symphony is as Czech as it is American. For example, the third movement is incredibly Czech, is completely a folk movement that could have just been written by him before coming to the US, while the first movement, some themes of the first movement, especially the second theme, which is initially given to the flute, and then the beautiful English horn melody, the memorable English horn melody of the second movement, is a very American tune. It even has words. And many of the themes also of the last movement, plus this kind of expansive, heroic nature of the music, are really very American. So this symphony, which is a symphony that anyone who is part of a symphony orchestra will have a very strong memory of having done it. In my case, I did it within the first year that I was part of an orchestra in Interlochen, Michigan, in summer camp, National Music Camp. And then I did it in Mexico and elsewhere as part of orchestras. And then it's a piece that I started conducting as soon as 1998. And I also love the fact that it's great music that goes very deep into people's minds and that combines the beauty, the depth, but also the immediacy of this genius music. So I'm very happy to be starting this this season that pays homage to this beautiful idea of America 250 with a program that includes a work by an American composer, Samuel Barber, by a Russian composer who was a hero in the US, Rachmaninoff, and by a Czech composer who made his home in the New World in the US. It's a beautiful example of what it means to be a classical musician in the US. I don't know one single classical musician in the US who has not been impacted by a teacher from elsewhere, or the opposite, which is something that we all know as classical musicians. We all have in our DNA someone who came from elsewhere. And that doesn't mean that that someone is a better teacher or a worse teacher, but it shows the best of both worlds. This piece is a very important piece that we all enjoy and that we really love to share with you. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us for Backstage Pass. For information on more concerts, visit ncsymphony.org.